Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Hoopsville on this Thursday, January 10th, 2019. I am your host, Dave McHugh. We are into the conference grind. That is the theme of the show. We are in it. We're driving. It is going to be tough on both the men's and the women's side for the most part across the board. If you got questions for us, there's lots of ways to get a hold of us, interact with us, etc. You can tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. You can email us, hoopsville at D3Hoops.com. Join us on Facebook, Facebook.com/Hoopsville. Yes, we're on Instagram at D3Hoopsville there as well, though we don't interact using the show all that often in there. You can also, let's see here, email us, hoopsville at D3Hoops.com. I got a little word earlier today, there may be a slight issue with the email, so try it. If it bounces on you, you can find my email online on D3Hoops.com. Email me there. We're trying to find... I got an email earlier today saying that the Hoopsville account bounced on somebody. Strange. I sent it up to Tech, which is Pat Coleman, to find out if anything popped up. We'll find out if that's true. But Hoopsville at D3Hoops.com. Hoopsville at D3Hoops.com if you got questions. Again, we're on Facebook. We're on Periscope. We are on all kinds of places where you can tune in and join us, and we hope you'll take advantage of that. I know a bunch of you are watching so far, and we thank you for that. And we'll try and get to your questions. Remember, we can't get to every single solitary question, but we will do our best when we can. Of course, a reminder, Thursdays we primarily focus on the East region, Mid-Atlantic, Great Lakes, and West regions. Does not mean we will not talk about other topics. Does not mean we will not talk about other guests. Or have other guests, as today will also debut the WBCA Center Court segment, which is a chance for us to talk to women's basketball coaches about what else is going on, sometimes about other things that they're involved in Division III, other things they're involved in on their campus, other things they're involved in outside, maybe in their communities somewhere, or the like. And tonight we will have a special one, and we'll talk about that momentarily. Believe it or not, and this is more of a pat on my own back, so forgive me, we have our WBCA segments basically scheduled right now through February 7th. It's a little bit wacky, to be honest, but we're thrilled with that. We have more to come, clearly, but we got ahead of the ball game, as it were. Men's-wise, the NABC Coaches Corner will debut on Sunday. We hinted at this on Tuesday night, was it? Yeah, it was Tuesday night. We will be talking with Shriner Athletics Director, former basketball coach in Texas, Bill Riley. Raleigh will join us. We haven't talked to him in a few years here on the program. We'll talk to him about a bunch of things, including rules. What has been brought in this year, rule changes ahead. We'll even talk about the quarters. Why haven't men gone to quarters? So a little bit of a tease there. NABC Coaches Corner coming up on Sunday. Talk to Bill Riley, head coach at Shriner, athletics director at Shriner. He was a head coach at Southwestern at one point and has been in Texas. He's been a huge member of the NABC, and we appreciate him being on board with us. So there you go. All right, so let's talk first off what we got coming up tonight on what we're calling the conference grind, the tease, the grind of conference plays in full gear. Nothing beats a team up or reveals how good one is like the grind of conference play. That is certainly the case, and we'll talk to four teams who are certainly playing well. A little bit rare that we always get ranked teams. Our four main guests tonight are all ranked. That's not prototypical, but it happened to happen today. We'll first talk to Pat McKenzie from number 11 St. John's men's basketball. Talk about the Johnnies doing well at the top of the MIAC now, having replaced St. Thomas's domination, but also why St. Thomas is not to be counted out. We'll then talk to Ben Stikowski, the senior guard from the number 20th ranked Wabash squad. That Wabash squad, assuming everything goes okay this weekend, is going to leap into the top 20, higher into the top 25. They are 20 now. They just knocked off number 11 Wittenberg. Oh, I believe it was number 11 Wittenberg. Is they number 11? I have them a little too high off the top of my head. Number 13 Wittenberg. I have them, I think, around 11. And honestly, a little bit nervously at 11. Well, Wabash proved that. Wabash, with a dominating win over Wittenberg, will jump. We will talk to Ben about what it's like to be on the squad as a senior and what else he is doing with his studies and whatnot. Alyssa Pulaski, the number 14th ranked Geneseo women's basketball coach, took over for Scott Hemmer, who we thought would never leave Division III, but Scott Hemmer's gone. Scott, if you're listening, you're still dead to me. Scott and I are friends. We'll talk to her about not only having the program still in the top 25 in her first year, but what are the expectations that have now come along as an alum taking over for Scott, who was so good with that Knights program. She was an assistant coach under Scott while also playing for Scott. We'll talk about the evolution, as it were, with the Knights program and what is ahead. They've actually got a bit of a tough schedule ahead of them in the SUNYAC, at least it looks like on paper. Then we'll go to the WBCA Center Court segment. Megan Wilson, Platteville women's basketball coach, will come on, talk about her daughter's battle with cancer, her 6-year-old daughter's battle with cancer, and the decision that Megan took to step away from the sidelines for a part of this season to help Palmer in her battle. She'll come up in the WBCA Center Court, which includes our little fun question segment at the end. Got our questions right here. We didn't lose them this year. We held on to them all season long. We are ready to go with said questions. So, maybe not. I found one version. The other version's around. We'll find it. And then Trevor Woodworth from the number 3 ranked Scranton women's basketball team will be on the show. They are dominating again. They had a huge win over Moravian. Absolutely incredible. We'll talk to him about that. Dan Tome is how I want to say it, Dan. I assume that's how it is. WIAC race will be a barn burner. Oshkosh out front for now. Yeah, on the men's side, the WIAC race is going to be a barn burner. I think I've been saying that since preseason. We knew it was going to be good. Oshkosh is certainly the good team. They beat Stevens Point yesterday, 78-68. Some would argue it may not have been that close. Oshkosh, the 5th-ranked team in the country. Stevens Point, the 9th-ranked team in the country, in what is a week of great battles of top 25 teams in conference. We talk about Wabash, Wittenberg. We'll talk in a little bit about the Wits in a moment, but here was another good one between Oshkosh and Stevens Point. In my opinion, Stevens Point shouldn't move anywhere around from where they are at 9. Granted, we have games this weekend. Oshkosh solidifies itself at 5. I don't think they can move up necessarily, but we'll see. They've got River Falls ahead of them. Stevens Point has got Eau Claire ahead of them. Of course, Eau Claire is playing well this season as well, and that's the problem in the WIAC. You've got Oshkosh, you've got Stevens Point. Eau Claire is playing well. Whitewater obviously is very good. Don't know what to make of Platteville, but they could easily ruin a few nights here and there. That's just 5. There's 8. You can't count out River Falls. It's going to be a battle, to say the least. Right now, 14 teams ranked in the top 25, or 3 teams ranked in the top 14 in the WIAC in men's basketball. Should be great. Then flip it on the other side. Oshkosh is 15th. I wouldn't say the WIAC is as good on the women's side in the sense of how good the men's side is comparatively, but the women's is going to be a battle as well. Hope is not that good for guys that can't beat Calvin. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. Hope. Listen, the problem I have with Hope right now is I just haven't seen anything that jumps out at me and says these guys are really good. I thought early on in my preseason top 25, I had them for a few weeks. I thought they were going to be pretty good, but losing to Calvin 74-70 really surprised me. I guess we could call this rivalry week on top of everything. It was at Calvin. That certainly says something, but Hope now has lost 3 of their last 5. They've lost 4 of their last 8. You can't do that. Hope is 8-6 right now. They're 1-2 in conference play. I thought Greg Mitchell was going to have a little bit of a better squad. Though that said, a lot of people thought Hope wasn't going to be a dominating team, and I agree. I thought Hope would be a 15-25 ranked team. They're not that. They're 6 losses already, and it's not going to get any easier. They got Adrian, then on the road at Alma and Olivet. Olivet may be the class of this conference. Then home against Albion and Trine. Then on the road against Kalamazoo. They'll take on Calvin then at the beginning of February, and then they got to still go through Adrian, Alma, Olivet, and Albion. Hope is burying themselves. The MIAA may only get 1 team in yet again, and it may not be Hope, and it certainly won't be Calvin unless one of those 2 teams wins the automatic bid, and Olivet's got enough position to do better. And by the way, there's a lot of people who talked about Trine. Remember, Trine technically won the conference selection at the beginning of the season. They're 2-1 in a 4-way tie with Calvin, Olivet, and Alma behind Albion. And of course, Albion's off to a 3-0 start in the conference. So the MIA is eating itself from the middle, not from the top like a little bit more like the WIAC and CCIW, but from the middle. And it's interesting, to say the least. Yes, Brian, both Oshkosh teams, as I indicated, are on fire. Both teams have the second best record combined. Yeah, really impressed with Oshkosh so far, as we said earlier, but not surprised. I expected those two Oshkosh teams to be up top. I didn't know how well the men would play under a new head coach who had been in the assistant. Those transitions can be difficult. We'll talk to Geneseo coming up about that. But they obviously have the talent. They obviously have good players. Boots is obviously a very good member for that men's team. And we always knew the women's team was going to be the class of the WIAC. So no surprise, Oshkosh is as good as they are. Don't want to lose track. We will talk about the Wits here momentarily. And just double checking, see if anybody tried to email us, just to see if anything came through. Nope. Okay, not a big deal. Didn't have to necessarily email us. Check our tweet deck. See if anybody has gotten in there. Capital Crusader says, I think Capital men's basketball may talk about them tonight. We will. And that will get us in transition. We'll wrap up this segment with the Wits conversation. But let's talk about the top 25, our top 25 recap tonight. We'll start with the fact that no one in the top 6 has lost so far. Whitworth lost to number 4 Whitman. We'll talk about that in a little bit. MIT lost to Emerson. MIT's 12-2. It's deceiving. They lost 84-65. They are banged up. At least 3 of their stars is out with injury. 1 hasn't played at all this season. They may be without another one for the rest of the season. That's speculation. That's not based on anything, so do not report that or take it to the bank. It's just speculation, and they got a 3rd out. I don't know what it is about injuries with MIT. We've talked about it in the past. We've talked to Larry Anderson about it. I don't know why they just have that seeming luck, because the injuries are also usually pretty significant injuries, not like pulled hamstrings or anything. They've only got 2 losses, but by the end of the weekend, Wheaton might catch them for all we know, and it certainly turns the NUMAC race on its head. And on top of that, Springfield seems a shell of themselves. They lost to, was it Curry or Clark this week? Stevens Point, we mentioned, lost to Oshkosh. Again, a team ranked ahead of them. Marietta lost to Capital, and that gets us to Capital. 82-78. If anything, it's proving to us that Capital may be better than we thought they were. Capital has John Carroll ahead Saturday, so that will tell us a lot. They're 12-2, and it seems like they're pretty darn good, especially a win over Marietta. That said, I kind of hinted when we talked to Marietta in December that Marietta has these moments where they go through these little blips, it seems, and Marietta's gone now through a blip. They've had 2 losses in the last few games. So you start to gauge, is Capital just that good, or is Marietta really not that good and Capital took advantage of it? It's hard to say. That said, I think Capital is pretty darn good. I know colleagues think Capital is pretty darn good. I think they will leapfrog into the top 25, albeit they got to get past John Carroll this weekend. And that's what turns this conference race into a whole nother beast. John Carroll, Marietta, Capital, who knows who else is going to enter the fray. The conference race turns into a little bit of a meltdown as well. Capital also, I think, 2,000-point score. They got one more closing in on it. They got the firing power. They've clearly shown that they can play with the best by beating Marietta. And that game, by the way, I don't remember where that game was played, to be blunt. But Capital is a team that I'm curious about. I want to see him get past John Carroll. Then we can talk about him maybe being in the top 25 next week. If they beat John Carroll and beat Marietta and John Carroll in the same week, they will leapfrog into the top 25 and probably pretty significantly on top of that, to say the least. Let's see here. Will Hannah join? B. Pester asking us on Periscope. Oh, thanks, Ryan. The game was in Marietta. So for Capital to go to Marietta and win that game on the road and have the return, I assume they have their return still. Yeah, actually, I know they do. Back at Capital. That puts Capital in the driver's seat, to say the least. Their game this week will be at home against John Carroll, so they will have to go on the road to Carroll. But listen, Capital looks scary. Wabash looks scary. It looks like 2 teams that no one was looking at in the Great Lakes region may be the class of the Great Lakes region. Again, we're here in early to mid-January. There's a lot still to be played, but it's telling. It's certainly telling. Yes. Yes, they also beat Mount. Right, Mount. There's another example. Mount was looking really good at the turn of the holidays. We were talking about getting Mount on the show maybe. And now it seems like, and that's the thing. And that's the thing with, again, that grind we were talking about in conference play can turn things around so quickly. And all of a sudden a team you weren't paying attention to because you thought somebody else was hot. Turns out that team's the one who's hot and you weren't paying attention to them. And that can happen even with conference opponents who think they know each other. So now Capital's at 12-2. Marietta's at 12-2. Mount isn't that bad and has a really good record. John Carroll's in the mix. This conference is going to be worth watching, to say the least. Continuing the conversation, St. John's and Rochester had good. Rochester hasn't played. They'll play Chicago and WashU, a really good test, though those games both at the Palestra in upstate New York. St. John's defeated Concordia Moorhead, defeated Gustavus Adolphus, and they have St. Olaf ahead. They got that really tough 3-game stretch in conference. We'll talk to their head coach coming up about that. Wittenberg, we talked about, lost to Wabash. They got Worcester ahead. It doesn't get any easier for Wittenberg here as the 25th ranked Scots, who, by the way, I was surprised stayed in the top 25 with 3 straight losses. The Scots will get their shot at Berg. We'll see how that one turns out. Whitewater, Swarthmore, St. Thomas, Plattsburgh, and Randolph-Macon all survived. Swarthmore, a dominating win over Gettysburg by 30. St. Thomas with a win over St. Olaf with Augsburg ahead. Plattsburgh beat Potsdam, got Fredonia and Buffalo State. Not much we're going to read out of Plattsburgh this week, to be blunt. Randolph-Macon put 60-some-odd points up in the first half and defeated Shenandoah 117-60. I guess Randolph-Macon a little pissed at the loss they had against Guilford. Salisbury took their first loss to Mary Washington, a Mary Washington team that had lost to Frostburg not that long ago. Salisbury's 12-2. I ranked them this week in my top 25. I second-guessed it every step of the way, but everything was telling me I had to put them in there. I felt like I had too many Mid-Atlantic teams to begin with. Maybe that's a sign here, a 14-point loss at Salisbury. As good as they've been playing, are not as good as the sum of their parts. We'll see. I'm going to keep an eye on Salisbury, but I wouldn't be surprised they lose a ton of points off that loss to Mary Washington. Wabash, Christopher Newport, Lynchburg, Pomona, Pitzer, Amherst, and Worcester all won. I'll say this now. I'm not voting for Christopher Newport. I'm not buying into 12-2 right now. They don't look that great, but maybe I'm missing something. Lynchburg continues to impress at 14-1. Got to keep an eye on them. Pomona Pitzer is confusing at 13-1. Amherst, is it smoke and mirrors at 11-1? Beat Brandeis. They got their tests coming up. They got Wesleyan this weekend along with Connecticut College. I'll be interested to see how the Mammoths get out of that. And Worcester, I just didn't know why they were voted for, but 11-3 is still pretty good. They've got Wittenberg ahead. In the receiving votes category, Scranton, Occidental, Illinois Wesleyan, Johns Hopkins, and Guilford lost. I'm voting for Hopkins. I love Hopkins, but a loss to Muhlenberg is ugly, 56-52, though Muhlenberg nearly coughed that game away, to be honest with you. It was a bigger lead than that. Hopkins is good. Maybe they're now starting to figure out how to play without Delaney. Illinois Wesleyan's 9-6, lost to North Central by 2. I don't know what to tell you. Titans, I thought, were better than that. I know Bob Quillman's just as dumbfounded. We'll get him on the show at a later date and get his latest update on that. Guilford, who had beaten Randolph-Macon, lost to Roanoke. Of course, I thought Roanoke was going to be the class of that conference this season. On the women's side, Mary Hardin-Baylor lost to Thomas More. Probably not that big a deal, except it was by 18, 73-55. Of course, St. Thomas More now 22-0. We won't talk about them much the rest of the 6 weeks or so here, as they only have 3 games on the schedule and 5 total before we get to March. Wartburg lost to Luther. That one jumped out at all of us on Wednesday night. Emory and Henry lost to Guilford by 20. Guilford played their starters almost the entire game. Middlebury lost to Westfield State. Surprising, I saw Westfield State. Maybe they got some of their injured players back. I don't know. We'll have to keep an eye on that one. 84-79. Surprised that Middlebury's first loss would be to Westfield. Eau Claire lost to La Crosse. Okay, not surprising. Though Eau Claire is good, so is La Crosse. Baldwin Wallace lost to Ohio Northern. Interesting. And Bethel lost to Augsburg. Okay, so interesting. Those in the receiving votes category. A couple of notes before we got to take a break. And boy, we got to take it quick. We will talk about the Wits. Really great game. Really fascinating and awesome game. Not the best played game. I think both teams came out a little too aggressive, too gung-ho. I think the officials, knowing it was a big game and potential to be aggressive and gung-ho, were whistling things tight early. I've heard word from both sides that the officiating was really inconsistent from their vantage point. I can't speak on that, but I can say I think the officials tried to drive a message that they weren't going to allow a lot of stuff, and the players and teams just didn't respond to not make it a foul game. The first half, we were shooting double bonuses with 7 minutes left, and players, especially for Whitworth, got in foul trouble. Really impressed that Whitworth avoided the foul trouble being a problem. They went deep on their bench. They had to. Those guys stepped up. That has been what I felt is an Achilles heel. I thought they played well and stayed with it. Whitman was about to blow them out in the second half, up 13, and Whitworth came back. I also thought Whitman let off the gas. That said, Whitman in a hostile environment wouldn't mind a little bit better behavior, but certainly played well. The defense is something Whitworth's used to, so it wasn't maybe its best display of that defense, but it was still a factor. Hit some big shots when they needed to. Jacob Jones had some huge rebounds and second chance opportunities that I thought really helped Whitman out. That was a game you expected. It was maybe a little uglier than we expected it to be, but it was a good game between two top 7 squads. Those two teams are going to be in the conversation the rest of the season, and now we can start talking about maybe trying to make sure we split up the wits in the NCAA tournament. It's going to be hard, but we can certainly start talking about that. Got a rematch coming, obviously. It's going to be in Walla Walla this time. That's going to be a factor. But those two teams put on a show. It was fun to stay up and watch it. Well, I'm up anyway, but it was fun to watch that game late. The women's game prior to that was even exciting. So really excited to see that. Couple of quick news notes we'll talk about at the end of the show. Remember I talked about Olivet women's basketball and something wasn't adding up? They fired their head coach. We'll talk about more of that down the road and some other things. So that's that. There you go. First quick rundown of the show. We had a lot we jammed in there. And a lot more we could certainly talk about, but we got guests we got to get to, so we will get to said guests. But later when we wrap up the show, we'll talk about Olivet and we'll talk about some other things we're seeing around Division III this week. When we come back, we will talk to Pat McKenzie from St. John's. It's a pre-taped interview, so if you have questions for him, I'm sorry you will miss them. But we will certainly have a pretty good conversation with Pat. I chatted with him earlier today. Then Ben Stakowski will join us from Wabash. Alyssa Pulaski, the head coach at Geneseo, will join us. Then Megan Wilson, the head coach at Platteville in the WBCA Center Court segment. And then Trevor Woodruff, the third-ranked Scranton women's basketball coach, will join us. That's all I had. Most guests we've jammed into a show, maybe unadvisedly so. Who knows? We'll see. But we'll find out as we move this show along. So that's what you got coming up. You ready to join in, getting in? Roll up the sleeves, folks. Lots to talk about in Division III. You're watching Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA NABC Studios. Next up, St. John's men's basketball.
Being a part of the different activities and organizations that I've been a part of, I'm actually able to see myself where I'm like, hey, I actually can make a change. I'm one person that can make a difference.
Division III has helped me to develop teamwork skills, critical thinking skills, time management skills.
It's not just about basketball or it's not just about school. It's about developing yourself as a person altogether.
Welcome to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, home of Blue Gold Athletics. UW-Eau Claire has been ranked a top 5 regional public university for over 20 years. We graduate champions with the lowest debt and highest return on investment in the Midwest. Blue Gold Athletics is a Directors Cup Top 20 Division III program offering 22 sports with almost 700 student athletes. UW-Eau Claire is about excellence in the classroom, the field of competition, and the community. Are you the next Blue Gold?
My name is Marcus Walker. I was All-State, won a state championship, a high school All-American, and played college and pro ball. I played because I love the game. I grind to be the best. I sweat because I put in work. I'm strong because I believe. When I want to bring it before game time, I come to the house that college basketball built, the CBE. No matter your skill, take it to another level. Elevate your game right here at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center.
I coined my definition of success in 1934. My definition of success is peace of mind attained only through self-satisfaction and knowing you made the effort to do the best of which you're capable. It's like reputation and character. Reputation is what others perceive you to be. Character is what you are.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
In any way that we can.
To get a friend home safe.
To never blame the victim.
It's on us.
To stand up.
To make our community safe for all.
It's on us.
It's on us to look out for each other at parties.
It's on us.
To be more than just a bystander.
To step up and say something.
It's on us, all of us.
To stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Another Thursday edition of the program, and whether you're watching us live or you're listening to the podcast or watching it on demand, we appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If you got questions for us, you can always, whether we're on air or off air, tweet them to us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. You can always email them to us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. You can even join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. All that information scrolling at the bottom of your screen. Also, if you want, we're on Instagram at D3Hoopsville there, though that's more of a promotional side of things. Tend not to have conversations necessarily on Instagram. We just kind of enjoy looking at pictures, don't we not? Let's jump into now the West region. And for men's basketball, there's a lot going on. The Northwest Conference, we talked earlier about the Battle of the Wits the other night, and the fact that Linfield and George Fox are in the conversation. The SCIAC is kind of getting a little bit interesting. We'll talk more about that on future shows, to be sure. And, of course, we have the American Rivers Conference, Nebraska Wesleyan leading the way as the defending champs, but that one's somewhat interesting. The MIAC is the one that has certainly always gotten our attention over the years. It's always been St. Thomas until the last few years. Now it's their arch rival, St. John's. It seems to be leading the way, though. Got some interesting things going on this year. For the Johnnies, they're 12-1. Their own loss is the second game of the season out of the gate against Wisconsin Whitewater. They've beaten Platteville and La Crosse. They've already beaten Gustavus, Bethel, Hamlin, and St. Mary's in conference play, along with Augsburg, McAllister, Moorhead, and, Gustavus Adolphus again. But the big tests are probably ahead, so we figured a good time to bring in their head coach and talk to him. We are pre-taping this interview, folks, in case you're wondering, so any questions you might have, we aren't going to be able to get to them, but we hopefully cover your topics nonetheless. And Pat McKenzie joins us on the Hoopsville hotline. Sir, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You've got your alma mater here at 12-1, 8-0 in conference play, which I think is the part that jumps out to me, that as competitive as the MIAC has been, you've gotten through 8 games so far without stubbing your toe, technically.
Yeah, we have, and yeah, that technically is a good way to put it. We're, the league. I think everybody probably says that about their own conference, and there's truth to it. Is a lot of parity. Teams know you well, and we faced some good teams so far, and are fortunate to come out of it unscathed as of today.
Usually the second round is when things get more interesting for programs because they've seen you this year. Everyone knows you, and this is true for you against opponents as well. And so what jumped out at me was the second go-around with Gustavus Adolphus. First time you faced him December 1st, 12-point game at their place, competitive. You played him at home on Wednesday night. You didn't really provide a competitive game, 83-54. Is that a testament that you guys are getting stronger? Gustavus is maybe a little beat up, combination of both. What do we read into with that kind of result?
I don't know how much you can read into it. It probably was a better game than maybe the score would indicate, and I hope we're getting better. I hope we're continuing to grow, and when, like you said, you see a team the second time, so you have a feel for their tendencies and some of the things they want to do to you, and obviously the chess match that goes on is trying to figure out ways to counter that and maybe take advantage of it in certain cases. And we certainly did enough things well last night to get out of there with a win.
What are you guys doing well this season? What's clicking and what's working?
Well, I think we've got good balance. We've got a number of guys that can score, and that obviously makes offense a heck of a lot better and easier. So that balance has been huge, and thus far, we've been I think a pretty good defensive team. I mean, we've really locked in defensively, and I think, even from a year ago, today we're probably a better team than we were defensively at this time last year, and that's been huge to the success so far.
Better defensively. You went 19-1 in the conference last year, 23-4 overall. That's a scary statement to say if you're an opponent coming up against the Johnnies. But on the flip side of that, we would be remiss if we didn't ask this too. What aren't you doing well? What isn't maybe going the way you'd like it to go?
Well, we're still, I think at times can be a little sluggish with some of our rotations and some of our reads offensively. And then, I think really even looking at a box score, we're turning the ball over too much, and we've gotten away with it per se. But I think we all know that you continue to do that when you, like you said, you get into the second round of the conference. Those numbers are high. Your margin for error drops, and those are going to cost you.
Yeah, you're out. You have about 40 more turnovers this season in totality than it says your opponent, but you are out rebounding your opponents 40-24.5. You're shooting the lights out of the building compared to your opponents, 57% to 37%, and that includes beyond the arc at 45-31, and obviously shooting well at the free throw line. There's a lot on a stat sheet that you can read into, but that stuff jumps out at me. You've got some stellar numbers on this stat sheet.
Well, yeah, I mean, the numbers are good, and I think what that tells you is we've got good players. I mean, and we do have a good group, and as I mentioned before, those plays work better when guys make the shot at the end of them, and so that, I don't know that it's much more than that. We're fortunate to have some really good players that are making plays and playing well together, and thus, the numbers look pretty good because our guys have played well.
Your guys who play well include Stokeman, who's gotten plenty of national attention over his years at 15 points a game. He's shooting 55%. He's also shooting 53% from beyond the arc with 5 rebounds plus plenty of assists to hand out. On top of that, he gets his teammates involved, and those include Alde at 12.5 points and Walford at 12 points. You've got a lot of weapons because you got 2 more guys at 8 points or more a game. Your rebounds are being pulled in by Walford at 9, but everybody's involved there. You do have more than just one target. If you look at Stokeman, you've got other guys out there that make it really challenging for defenses, I suspect.
Well, yeah, I mean, you hope so. You hit it on the head. I mean, David he's really good. I mean, he's a darn good guard. He does everything well. Fun kid to coach. I mean, he's one of those guys that makes you look smarter than you are. And yet then you also have some other guys that are capable. I mean, we've touched on that balance. And with the balance, if they play together, we're able to kind of take what's there and share the ball and find the right matchup or the right shot. And again, they've been going in so far, so that makes life easier.
What you pretty much started the same 5. It's Stokeman, Alde, Welford, Hansen, who has 1 game where he didn't start, and Baker. That's been basically the group of 5 that gets out the door, as it were. What's important about that starting 5 at the beginning of a game or the beginning of the second half that you guys have relied on so heavily?
They've just played well together. I think they've given us we've gotten off to good starts. Again, I think they've been really sound defensively as a unit. And so, I'm kind of one of those guys that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And, as long as we're playing well and have kind of a rhythm or a rotation, we're going to stick with that. But I think it's also, we've had guys come in off the bench and we've got great depth this year. And that's been huge because different guys have stepped up different nights and given us the lift we needed. So again, so far, so good.
Let's circle back to Stokeman again. He leads the team in shooting for the most part. There's guys with better percentages, but just not qualified shot-wise. So leads the team in shooting, leads the team in outside the arc shooting, leads the team, I think, on free throw shooting for the most part. He's not the leading rebounder, but he's second. He's got the most assists. Unfortunately, he's got the most turnovers, but that's what happens when you have the ball in your hand. He also has the most steals, and he has the most points. That says a lot on the stat sheet. But what is it about him, as you said, makes you look good as a coach or makes his players look even better?
David he's probably the most competitive kid I've been around. I mean, he is extremely competitive and extremely smart. And so, that combination, he works at it. He understands what he needs to work at. He understands what a defense might do to him, how he can combat that. When to make a play for someone else, when to make a play for himself. I mean, he's really a well-rounded player. He's a well-rounded kid. I mean, he's a academic All-American. I mean, you can't say enough good things about him. And but I think those two traits, his intelligence and then his competitiveness, are kind of those separators.
What's the difference maybe in his game or the team? You mentioned defense, but there's got to be more going on, because 23-4 last year was certainly solid. 19-1 in the conference, ridiculously solid. That's St. Thomas type numbers. What is different about this team though this year? Because for some reason, and maybe I'm the only one, I've got you, I think, right around 10 in my ballot. What makes you guys? I feel like you're more dangerous this year, even though technically the cat's been out of the bag.
Yeah, well, I mean, I hope you're right. I don't.
I don't have a great track record.
Wonderful. Yeah, I hope you're batting 100%.
I don't know.
Rather, no. All right.
Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know that we are. Again, you just sort of turn the page, right, and try to focus on this year's group. If we are more dangerous, that would be awesome. I don't know that that's the case, but we've like I said, we've got great balance right now and really good depth, and the guys are playing well and they're playing together, and all those coach talk type things you mentioned are true with this group as of today, and we just want to continue to do everything we can to continue the momentum.
There's some interesting similarities between last year and this year so far. Last year, lost your first game of the season, the third game out. This time it was the second game out. Didn't lose last year until the second one until February 3rd against St. Olaf. But unfortunately, the end of the season resulted in Augsburg knocking you off in the tournament and then Bethany Lutheran knocking you guys off in the first round. You're on the same track record, as I said, right now. We're on the same track in the sense that you still haven't lost. You're deep into conference play now. What is going to preclude what happened at the end of last season, or what do you guys learn from the end of last season to try and use now?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
I'm sorry.
It's been a good day. Yeah, no, I appreciate
Great interview
that.
up until then, right?
It's funny because I think when you look at last year, professionally, personally, you name it, it was a great year. I mean, we had a lot of success, a lot of things to be proud of. A great run, and certainly since I've been coaching, as good a year as I've had, and yet haven't ever felt as bad at the end of a year. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the cruelty of this business: is the better you are, the better year you have, the harder it is when it ends. Mm-hmm. So that was certainly a learning point just from a big picture standpoint. But then I think that group of seniors last year we were hell bent on winning that conference, and I don't know that there might have been a subconscious kind of sigh of relief when we did, and I don't know if we lost a little bit of our edge or not, but we have to maintain that edge. The flip side of it is, Augsburg was really good last year, and they beat us, and Bethany Lutheran was really good and played out of their minds, and they beat us. So, it's not like we lost to two sisters of the poor.
True.
It just so happened that we got beat by two really good teams, and it's still I think it'll probably always be in the back of your mind. It kind of haunts you forever, and yet we got to turn the page and do everything we can to hope it doesn't happen again that way this year.
You got St. Olaf ahead of you, who beat you last season, though they're 7-6 so far. And then after that, lurking is St. Thomas, who you swept last season. It's not that long ago, Pat, that St. Thomas was the behemoth at the top of the MIAC, something like 10 straight conference championships. And you guys, every once in a while, because of the rivalry, would nip them. And that was the news. Now you're the ones who are on top of the conference. And St. Thomas, no one's talking about, certainly improved this year. They're right there in the mix, sitting in second in the conference right now. That game's lurking. As an alum, we were talking about the Wits rivalry. Hope Calvin's another one we always talk about. What's that rivalry like? And is sweeping a team in the season good enough?
You cut out right at the end of that, Dave. I'm sorry.
It's all right. tell us a little bit about the rivalry as an alum yourself and how it's ebbed and flowed. And on top of that, is sweeping your rival, as you guys did last year, good enough?
Well, you hit on that. I mean, they're very good, and they're loaded again this year. Yeah. I mean, they're legit. They got a great group. John, obviously, the whole staff. I mean, they do a great job down there, and certainly sweeping them. I think from an alumni standpoint, I've said before, I'm not. We could go 2-23 every year as long as we've got them those two times. It's a great rivalry. It's a ton of fun. I think the alums and the students and the fans certainly enjoy it. I think John would probably echo it. There is an added intensity to it with the atmosphere, and yet ultimately it's a game, and like you said, I mean, there were years where we swept them, and they still won the conference. Well, I'd rather win the conference, Sure. So it's still just one game in the conference schedule, but obviously the atmosphere, the intensity, the rivalry around it it's awesome. I mean, it's a great event.
One of those I definitely want to get to, along with the Wits and Hope Galvin and the rest. Looking forward to that somewhere down the road. Again, St. Olaf ahead, Carrollton and St. Thomas on the road, so you'll get St. Thomas at their place first before getting them at home near the end of the season. What's the message to the team in the locker room right now as you guys kind of really enter you've been in the fray for the conference, obviously having played 8 games, but you're really kind of turning into the grind of the conference now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is a big stretch for our league, where you get 3 or even at times 4 games in 7-8 days. So a lot will shake itself out. Ours is just, we got to, again, kind of turn the page, look forward. What do we have to do to get this next win, and how can we best position ourselves to make that happen? And so, the message right now is, what are a few things we can clean up from last night, and what are a few things we need to be, touching up, getting ready for St. Olaf, because they got a good group. I mean, I think they're a little bit deceiving. They've been injured. They finally are back to full strength. I think that's going to make a difference with them, because that's a team that returns a lot from an NCAA tournament team last year. So I think they're poised to make a real run at it here.
Finally, you got 5 non-conference games, and there's always a conversation about who's good enough in the MIAC to get out as an at-large, and 5 games isn't a lot to build an out-of-conference resume on. Is this a format that the conference is okay with sticking with? Women, I should point out, going back to double round robin, which will limit them, I think, to 3 non-conference games. Or is this something that the MIAC's got to really take a look at and find a way to open up some non-conference competition for everybody?
Yeah, I know we've talked about this before. I certainly, it is being talked about. I know that, and it is a concern. And how much traction it actually has, I don't know. I mean, I think some of this is probably above the coaches' meeting, and I can't speak for every coach in the league, but I feel pretty comfortable in the guys that I know well enough to say we all obviously want access to the NCAA tournament, and the size of our league at times can certainly prohibit that, I think, and you touched on it. It's been mentioned before. I don't have enough information to say where it goes or how it's going to go, but it's certainly a valid point.
Thank you for answering that. I forgot I had asked you in the past, but with the women going back to the double round robin next season, it's kind of come back in my mind. So
yeah,
that's the reason. I thought the women had gone in a nice direction, but we'll digress from there. Coach, thanks for taking the time, joining us. Really fascinated to see how your Johnnies are doing, and look forward to seeing how you guys do the rest of the season. As you know, we always give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those tuning in?
I'll just, I know you guys do a lot for the SIDs. I'll shout out ours.
Yes.
Ryan Klinkner. He goes by the Colonel. Why? I have no idea, but he does. And
love it.
He's as good as there is, so we appreciate all he does. So he's probably not even listening, but shout out to Klinkner.
He will now once everybody tells him that you said something. So
there you go.
I agree with you, sir. I love working with him with both this and the Gallardi. Unfortunately, not this past year, but that's another topic for another day. But not the results of him or I. But enjoy working with him. Also enjoy talking to you. Thanks for taking the time. Good luck. We'll talk to you somewhere down the road.
Thanks, Dave.
And he is Pat McKenzie, the alum of St. John's, leading his Johnnies to a 12-1 record, 8-0 in conference play. Again, coming up on Saturday at home against St. Olaf. Then next week, they got the doubleheader of Carrollton and St. Thomas before returning home on the 23rd. Against St. Mary's, MIAC's going to be fun to watch. Plenty of Plenty of action worth tuning into if you get the opportunity, especially that 21st game against St. Thomas. That should be must-watch television or web streaming or whatever you want to call it. Going to take another break. When we come back, plenty more Hoopsville ahead. You're watching Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA NABC Studios. More Hoopsville on the other side of this break.